Welcome to Celestial Zodiac. Today we're exploring Saturn, the iconic ringed planet and one of the most powerful forces in astrology. Saturn is the sixth planet from the Sun, known for its spectacular rings of ice and rock, and its massive cold atmosphere. This gas giant takes about 29.5 years to orbit the Sun, spending approximately 2 to 3 years in each zodiac sign. Because it moves so slowly, Saturn shapes entire phases of life, marking important turning points and long-term cycles of growth. In astrology, Saturn represents discipline, responsibility, structure, boundaries, and life lessons. It governs maturity, commitment, hard work, and the wisdom we gain through experience. Saturn shows where we must learn patience, develop resilience, build strong foundations, and face challenges that ultimately shape our character. It's the planet of karma. Instead of punishment, it teaches accountability and how to grow through effort and integrity. The name Saturn comes from the Roman god of time, agriculture, and order. It's a deity connected to cycles, seasons, and the rewards of long-term dedication. The Greeks called him Kronos, the god associated with time, discipline, and the passing of age. Over centuries, astrologers linked Saturn to perseverance, structure, limitation, and the lessons that help us become stronger, wiser, and more grounded. Collectively, when Saturn changes signs, it shifts the world's focus, influencing how societies handle responsibility, laws, systems, work ethics, and long-term goals. In fire signs, it challenges us to channel our passion responsibly. In earth signs, it strengthens stability and practicality. In air signs, it brings discipline to communication and ideas. And in water signs, it teaches emotional maturity and deeper self-awareness. In this video, we'll explore how Saturn expresses itself in each zodiac sign and how your lessons, responsibilities, challenges, and long-term growth unfold as this powerful planet travels from Aries all the way to Pisces. When Saturn enters Aries, lessons revolve around patience, discipline, and learning to direct impulsive energy constructively. Growth comes through developing self-control, mastering initiative, and learning that strength is not just action but timely action. Responsibility becomes tied to independence and learning to lead with maturity rather than reactiveness. In interactions, they can appear bold yet cautious, working hard to balance courage with wisdom. The challenge lies in frustration or feeling blocked when progress isn't instant. When perseverance supports their natural drive, Saturn in Aries becomes a powerful force of focused ambition and courageous determination. When Saturn moves into Taurus, lessons involve building stability, financial responsibility, and long-term security. Growth comes through patience, consistency, and learning to trust the slow and steady path. Responsibility is tied to values, resources, and practical decision-making. They learn by developing endurance, working methodically, and creating strong foundations in their material and emotional lives. In interactions, they're calm, dependable, and grounded. The challenge is resisting change or clinging too tightly to comfort. When flexibility joins their determination, Saturn in Taurus becomes a resilient, steady architect of lasting success. When Saturn enters Gemini, lessons revolve around communication, mental discipline, and learning to focus scattered energy. Growth comes through developing clarity, responsibility in speech, and commitment to learning. They learn best by organizing information, refining their thinking, and taking their ideas seriously. In interactions, they're thoughtful, perceptive, and articulate, often working hard to communicate with precision. The challenge lies in overthinking, self-doubt, or feeling restricted in expressing themselves. When confidence balances their intellect, Saturn in Gemini becomes a wise communicator and a steady source of knowledge and insight. When Saturn moves into Cancer, lessons involve emotional maturity, security, and learning to care for oneself and others without fear. Growth comes through understanding boundaries, healing old patterns, and building strong emotional foundations. Responsibility becomes tied to family, home, and personal inner stability. They learn through vulnerability, patience, and nurturing with intention rather than obligation. In interactions, they're protective, empathetic, and cautious, working hard to feel safe and offer safety in return. The challenge is withdrawing too much or carrying emotional weight alone. When strength meets sensitivity, Saturn in Cancer becomes a deeply grounded, compassionate presence with immense emotional wisdom. When Saturn enters Leo, lessons revolve around confidence, authenticity, and responsible self-expression. Growth comes through learning to lead with integrity, shine without ego, and develop creative discipline. Responsibility becomes tied to using one's talents purposefully and stepping into roles that require courage and maturity. They learn by balancing pride with humility and finding strength in genuine self-worth rather than external validation. In interactions, they're warm yet composed, working hard to express themselves with dignity. The challenge lies in fear of judgment or feeling pressure to perform perfectly. When discipline supports their natural charisma, Saturn in Leo becomes a powerful, inspiring leader with a steady, grounded sense of purpose. When Saturn moves into Virgo, lessons focus on improvement, health, routine, and practical mastery. Growth comes through developing organization, responsibility in daily habits, and attention to detail without becoming overwhelmed. Responsibility is tied to service, precision, and bringing order to life. They learn through consistent effort, problem-solving, and refining their skills step by step. In interactions, they're helpful, reliable, and observant, often working diligently behind the scenes. The challenge lies in self-criticism, perfectionism, or fear of making mistakes. When acceptance balances their high standards, Saturn in Virgo becomes a source of clarity, efficiency, and practical wisdom. When Saturn enters Libra, lessons revolve around balance, fairness, relationships, and cooperation. Growth comes through developing commitment, healthy boundaries, and responsibility in partnerships. They learn by understanding both sides of a situation, strengthening communication skills, and approaching relationships with maturity and equality. In interactions, they're diplomatic, thoughtful, and patient, working hard to create harmony. The challenge lies in indecision or placing too much weight on others' approval. When self-assurance supports their desire for fairness, Saturn in Libra becomes a graceful peacemaker. They become someone who builds strong, stable, and deeply meaningful connections. When Saturn moves into Scorpio, lessons involve emotional depth, trust, power dynamics, and transformation. Growth comes through confronting fears, releasing old patterns, and learning to use personal power responsibly. Responsibility becomes tied to honesty, intimacy, and navigating intense emotions with maturity. They learn through deep introspection, resilience, and understanding the unseen forces that shape their lives. In interactions, they're perceptive, intuitive, and steadfast, often sensing the truth beneath the surface. The challenge lies in holding on to pain, becoming too guarded, or struggling with control. When vulnerability supports their strength, Saturn in Scorpio becomes a transformative force, one capable of profound healing, courage, and renewal. When Saturn enters Sagittarius, lessons revolve around truth, belief systems, and responsible expansion. Growth comes through developing integrity, practicing what they preach, and grounding their ideals in real experience. Responsibility becomes tied to education, travel, philosophy, or sharing knowledge with wisdom rather than impulse. They learn best by exploring with intention, seeking meaning in a structured way, and committing to a purpose that inspires long-term growth. In interactions, they're honest, thoughtful, and open-minded, but working to balance optimism with realism. The challenge lies in rigid beliefs or resisting limits. When discipline supports their vision, Saturn in Sagittarius becomes a wise, powerful guide of clarity, purpose, and expansive understanding. When Saturn moves into Capricorn, lessons center on discipline, ambition, and achieving mastery. This is Saturn's home sign, so its energy is especially strong here. Growth comes through hard work, perseverance, and building structures that stand the test of time. Responsibility becomes tied to career, leadership, and long-term goals. They learn through patience, strategy, and taking steady steps toward success. In interactions, they're serious, reliable, and purposeful, often carrying a sense of duty from a young age. The challenge lies in putting too much pressure on themselves or fearing vulnerability. When balance softens their determination, Saturn in Capricorn becomes a pillar of strength capable of extraordinary achievement and long-lasting success. When Saturn enters Aquarius, lessons involve independence, innovation, community, and intellectual responsibility. Saturn is the traditional ruler of Aquarius, so this placement blends discipline with originality. Growth comes through learning to think differently while also committing to long-term visions for the future. Responsibility becomes tied to social causes, technology, friendships, or groups with a shared purpose. They learn through observation, experimentation, and standing apart from the crowd with integrity. In interactions, they're thoughtful, unique, and objective, often bringing clarity to complex situations. The challenge lies in emotional detachment or resisting structure entirely. When stability supports their originality, Saturn in Aquarius becomes a visionary builder that creates systems and ideas benefiting the collective. When Saturn moves into Pisces, lessons revolve around emotional boundaries, intuition, compassion, and spiritual maturity. Growth comes through learning to trust their inner voice while also grounding their dreams in reality. Responsibility becomes tied to healing, empathy, creativity, and understanding subtle emotional dynamics. They learn through introspection, patience, and navigating the intersection between the material world and the unseen. In interactions, they're gentle, thoughtful, and deeply perceptive, often carrying emotional wisdom beyond their years. The challenge lies in escapism, confusion, or taking on others' burdens. When clarity supports their sensitivity, Saturn in Pisces becomes a healing force, balancing intuition with structure and turning dreams into meaningful purpose. As Saturn travels through the zodiac, it reminds us of the value of patience, discipline, and the lessons that shape who we become. Every 2 to 3 years, this powerful planet shifts its focus, guiding us to build stronger foundations, set healthier boundaries, and grow through responsibility rather than resistance. In fire signs, Saturn teaches strength and direction. In earth signs, it reinforces stability and structure. In air signs, it clarifies ideas and communication. And in water signs, it deepens emotional wisdom and inner resilience. These cycles influence how we mature, how we handle challenges, and how we rise into our potential. Saturn doesn't limit us, it prepares us. It asks us to face what needs strengthening so we can build a life that stands the test of time. Understanding Saturn helps us move through difficulties with purpose, trust the process, and honor the long-term growth unfolding within us. Whether your Saturn is bold like Aries, grounded like Taurus, thoughtful like Gemini, or intuitive like Cancer, remember every placement offers a unique path to mastery. Saturn doesn't judge your progress. It supports your evolution step by step, lesson by lesson. Thank you for watching Saturn in the Zodiac. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and share it with fellow stargazers. And stay tuned. Next, we'll explore Uranus and how this dynamic outer planet influences innovation, awakening, and personal freedom.